I needed to let the brain meat cool a little bit before making this video. The demo for Visions of Mana had a truly profound effect on me, and I'm going to go into that a little bit deeper. But I suspect that it had the same effect on a lot of JRPG fans who sunk their teeth into this demo. And I'm not going to beat around the bush, I'm just going to say it outright. I obviously think everybody should try this demo, but I'm not going to just glaze this thing without calling it out for its mistakes too. I mean, that's what we do. The sweet is never as sweet without the bitter, and there's no appreciating Solace without first knowing dread. So, we'll get into it. If you like nuanced discussions on gaming, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to join the Turtle Kingdom community. The Solace, or the good. Obviously, we're going to start with the combat, which is, to me, where this game shines the brightest. Having played all of the mainline Mana games and some of the spin-offs, this is usually the case. Combat is where this game shines, that and its interface. The demo takes you to a seemingly early point in the game where you have 5 characters in your party, but only 3 of them are playable. You have Val, you know, your main character, the damage dealer, and to a degree, a tank. And then you have Morley, your fast-paced, short-range damage dealer. Seems ideal on single targets more than anything. And then there's Karina, who pretty much seems to be your magic and spellcasting oriented character, but she does have melee potential. Each of them have their strengths and weaknesses in battle, which you would expect, but I think one of my favorite parts about the dynamic of these characters is how balanced Val felt. Normally, a main character in a JRPG feels just so strong in every respect that they could carry you on their own, and you really only need to switch off of them out of curiosity or preference. However, there were at least a few fights that it was almost necessary to make full use of your party members and switch around. And relying solely on Val was a major disadvantage because of his lack of his speed. This kind of balance is honestly what I've been looking for in a JRPG that has multiple characters. I even complained about this kind of thing with Star Ocean because, you know, Claude, the main character, he's busted. And that's typically how it is for most MCs. Some other things is great improvements over the previous games. One of the things that I love is the elemental vassals and how they're worked in. I don't want to get too deep into technicals, but suffice it to say, they're equipable and they're swappable. And this gives the characters like a vast range of classes to play. Each character has a different class depending on the elemental they choose. So if one character puts on a fire elemental, for example, they get a class, but it's going to be completely different if another character puts on that elemental. And I think that that's awesome, right? This means that your options for party compositions are truly vast. But I have one issue with this, and I'll bring that up in the dread or bad portion of the video, but mostly I do love what they've done here. There's just so much you can do with party composition. Long story short, the combat is varied enough to make it extremely interesting, and everyone seems viable. This might be the best combat mechanics of the entire series. Unlike most of the Mana fandom, though, I love Dawn of Mana and the panic system, and I wish that Visions had done that, where they use, you know, obstacles or things around in the environment as part of combat. I wish they bring some of that back. But I think for what we got here, this is just like a really strong evolution of Trials or Secret of Mana, and I'm very, very happy with this. I think it's pretty great. Next, it's the aesthetic, and while it might not be the best thing of the game, it's probably my personal favorite. I said this in another video, but the whimsy and high fantasy setting, the character design, the music, my God, everything just, it feels... It's like you're on a new adventure in a new world. And I love the way the setting just makes you feel. It's so fucking perfect for the setting. I hope that as the story progresses, and the game has that eventual tonal shift where it gets a little darker, that the aesthetic kind of matches that. Honestly, though it's not in the same style, I get the exact same feeling that I got when I played Chrono Cross for the first time as a kid. The bright, beachy vibes, the beautiful music that, you know, fills me with wonder, the character designs being so incredibly handsome. And on that note, why is Val so slutty with that midsection? My God. I think this is probably why the demo had such a profound effect on me. It pulled me back to like the simpler days of JRPG exploring without overwhelming me with a needlessly large world. But of course, this is just the demo and we'll see if that changes. Another thing that I liked is the English dub for the game. For the most part, it's better than it was in Trials of Mana. And Trials probably had one of the worst dubs I've ever heard in a game. And I'm probably hypersensitive to it because I just recently played through Trials of Mana, and then I'm playing Dawn of Mana right after, and that had a phenomenal dub. So, you know, I'm probably noticing it a lot more, but, you know, this dub is not what Trials was, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a major improvement over the last Mana installment, which was the Trials remake. Ultimately, I'm not going to worry that the main character is going to sound like a cheese grater scraping against my eardrum. One of the last major points in this game's favor is it runs quite nicely on PS5 and PC, and that's where I tested it. Though the cutscenes do seem to be locked to 30 frames per second, I can turn my head on that seeing as the frame rate is unlocked on PC for pretty much all of the gameplay. So, you know, I'll pick and choose. Only a few minor stutters, but the game otherwise runs beautifully. I do hope that they iron out the small kinks before the launch because there were some minor stutters, but overall I really had no complaints. But I think the biggest problem that it had is the game, from what I understand, it might be running on Denuvo. And like I said, the sweet is never sweet without the bitter. This game is not perfect. So let's talk about the dread. If the Denuvo part is true, that's a big problem. If you're wondering what Denuvo is, we'll just say that it's an anti-tampering, anti-cheat that kind of makes a lot of games unplayable for many PC users. It's so bad that a lot of people won't even buy games that have Denuvo involved. I hope that Denuvo claim wasn't true. I have not verified this myself, but if it is true, it's going to be a big problem for a lot of people. Another major issue is there was a lack of variety in the world activities. They give you some side quests during the demo, but it's all a bunch of kill quests or fetch quests, and you're otherwise just scouting for treasure while you're running out in the big world. I know it's not fair to compare this game to the likes of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but FF7 Rebirth absolutely nails the large zone thing by not only making it fun to explore, but giving you things to do that isn't just killing. And I hope that there's some mini games or something out there to kind of balance that out. This would be largely new to Mana, but I would love to see that. Another issue I had is the menus, and this is largely personal preference, but I think this is the first time in a Mana game that I've not enjoyed the menus. I didn't really jive with how they worked. It just felt clunky, jumping back and forth, and even by the end of the demo, I was still struggling when I had to go into the menu to remember where things were. It just felt like I had to go to too many different places to do too many different things. I do wish things were laid out just a little bit better. Like, I don't see a need to have to tab over to handle shortcuts versus handling assigned skills. Why not just put it all on the same page? There's plenty of room. I don't know. Again, personal preference, but I'm sure, you know, somebody smarter than me said, no, this is the way it needs to be. I didn't really jive with it. The fourth thing that I had an issue with was, and again, this is where I start to get a little nitpicky, but I didn't love the progression of the classes. Now, I referenced this earlier. This is my one little gripe that I had. I like that you have a lot of party composition options. That's wonderful, but I do wish that in each of those classes that I could pick and choose which skills that I got rather than just going down a straight line on a progression tree. Not a major complaint, but it is one that I have nonetheless. The fifth thing was probably the story that we're being introduced to at this point in the game. It feels incredibly predictable. And in the event that I'm right, I won't say much, but it doesn't give me much hope that we're going to get profound storytelling on a scale that we don't expect. You know, say what you will about Dawn of Mana, the way that that story is told in that game is actually quite impactful and jarring. I think the story might be more on the shallow side where Trials lives than it was with the dark story of Dawn of Mana. Lastly, the other thing worth mentioning is probably the facial expressions of some of the characters not being anything to write home about. I'm not going to say they're like dolls or anything, but I will say that they barely move their mouths sometimes and their faces don't really emote much when they talk. And it's one of those stark reminders that this isn't exactly a AAA game, despite it being a AAA publisher. That's one of those moments where you can kind of see the polish is not fully applied. But I mean, everything linked together here. I'm honestly very, very happy with this demo experience. My complaints are me being honest, you know, because I feel that I owe that integrity. But I think we have my personal game of the year on my hands. I hope this game sells like a bajillion fucking copies so we get a Dawn of Mana remake or a bunch of other stuff alongside it. And I will say it again, the feeling that this game evokes is it's indescribable. The nostalgia for something that I've not really experienced before it's hard to describe, but it just makes me feel like a kid again. I can't wait to sit and sink my time into it. I took paid time off from my adult job to sit and inject this game into my veins. You know, it's gonna swallow me whole the way Final Fantasy VII Rebirth did, which I still need to make some videos about that game and finish it for that matter. To be frank, I burned out on it kind of close to the end. If you've been around for a while, you know that it's been a little bit since I've posted anything on YouTube. This was due to a focus on my mental and personal health and handling some things in my personal life. But I think I might have found a way that I can balance both. And I'm back. And if you ever want to support, really the best thing that you can do is leave this video a like. It really, really helps us out. Anyway, that's it from me. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon. And long live the Turtle Kingdom.